At 76, Bill O'Reilly's life has become a story no spotlight can soften. The man who once commanded the highest-rated show on television, who confronted presidents, challenged power, and shaped national conversations, now faces a reality far more personal and painful than any headline could capture. Behind the sharp voice and unwavering confidence was a man quietly unraveling under the weight of scandal, betrayal, and the slow collapse of everything he had built. The world saw the public battles, the lawsuits, the sudden fall from grace. But what they never saw was the private heartbreak, the family fractures, the nights spent alone in silence, wondering how everything slipped away. This is not the story of a powerful commentator. It is the story of a man who reached the top of the world, only to discover the price of staying there was far greater than anyone ever imagined. Once celebrated at the very peak of American broadcasting, Bill O'Reilly's empire crumbled almost overnight. Public accusations, loud, relentless, and impossible to ignore, shattered the towering image he had built across decades. The scandals didn't just end a career. They stripped away the identity he had wrapped himself in. Yet, even deeper than the public humiliation was a private heartbreak. Throughout his life, Bill searched for a love that could anchor him, someone who could see the man behind the voice. But every time, that love slipped through his fingers. Now, as he stands in the final chapters of his life, looking back on years filled with triumph, controversy, and quiet loneliness, the tragedy of Bill O'Reilly is not just his fall from power. It is the story of a man who conquered the world, yet could never make peace with his own heart. Bill O'Reilly's story began far from the studio lights. Born on September 10, 1949, in Manhattan and raised in a working-class Irish Catholic family on Long Island, his childhood was shaped by tradition, duty, and discipline. His family was one of service. Police officers, firefighters, and teachers who believed in loyalty, structure, and doing what was right even when it was hard. Catholic schooling molded his early beliefs, teaching him that strength came from standing firm in your convictions. At Chaminade High School, one of the toughest Catholic academies in New York State, Bill learned to argue, to debate, to never back down. That fire followed him to Marist College, where he studied history, played football, and wrote columns that challenged his classmates and professors alike. Even then, he wasn't afraid to provoke. He wasn't afraid to stand alone. After graduation, O'Reilly tried to follow a more traditional path. He taught high school English and coached baseball, hoping to shape young minds the same way his teachers had shaped his. But something inside him was restless. The classroom walls were too small for his voice. In 1975, he stepped in front of a camera for the first time at a tiny station in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It was not glamorous, not even close, but it was the beginning. He spoke with crisp confidence, a sharp tone, and the firm gaze of a man who believed every word he said. That voice, steady, commanding, unmistakable, was the spark that would soon carry him from small-town local broadcasts to the national stage. He didn't rise with luck. He rose through persistence, through grit, through the relentless belief that he had something the world needed to hear. By 1977, Bill O'Reilly's ambition pulled him to WFAA-TV in Dallas, where his reporting became sharper, tougher, more unyielding. The turning point came when he exposed a network of police corruption so deeply rooted that his investigation forced multiple officers to resign. It was a risky story, one that made enemies, but it earned him national respect and marked him as a journalist who would rather challenge power than bow to it. In 1979, he moved to KMGH-TV in Denver, where another moment would solidify his reputation. When a skyjacking unfolded at the Denver airport in 1980, O'Reilly reported live through every tense moment. While chaos erupted behind him, his voice remained steady, precise, unwavering. That coverage earned him an Emmy and transformed him from a promising reporter into a rising force in American news. In 1982, he returned to New York City to join WCBS-TV, where his fearlessness was tested once again. Assigned to investigate corruption within the city's marshal system, O'Reilly spent 6 months uncovering bribery, extortion, and abuse of authority that had thrived in the shadows for years. His relentless pursuit of accountability led directly to reforms and earned him yet another Emmy. The message was clear. Bill O'Reilly was not just a broadcaster. He was a fighter. His success drew the attention of national networks, and soon he joined CBS News, traveling to Central America to cover the brutal conflict in El Salvador. He reported from the front lines, where gunfire and grief echoed behind every interview. There he learned that truth is never clean. It is carved out of danger, suffering, and human loss. By 1986, O'Reilly was at ABC News, where he was dispatched to cover the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska. For weeks, he stood in freezing winds documenting the environmental destruction and the lives that would never recover. His voice did not soften the tragedy. He told it exactly as it was. Then, in 1989, came the moment that would change everything. Inside Edition, a young and struggling news magazine show, abruptly replaced its host, and O'Reilly was placed in the anchor chair. Overnight, everything shifted. With sharp precision and controlled intensity, he delivered his first broadcast and called out the sensational, shallow style of modern media. Viewers noticed immediately. Ratings surged. Inside Edition had found its identity, and that identity was Bill O'Reilly, direct, uncompromising, unwilling to play nice for the sake of comfort or approval. Under his command, Inside Edition evolved from a struggling program into a national presence. Stories grew more serious. The tone grew sharper, and the audience grew larger. It was the moment Bill O'Reilly stopped being just a journalist and became a voice, one that millions would soon come to recognize, trust, challenge, and fear. His rise was unstoppable, but like all stories built on power and conviction, the cost would come later. And when it came, it would cut deeper than he ever imagined. The show blended hard news, crime investigations, celebrity scandals, and deeply emotional stories. But what truly set Inside Edition apart was Bill O'Reilly himself. His delivery was sharp, direct, and unapologetic. He didn't soften his words for comfort or approval. Viewers tuned in because they knew he would say what others hesitated to. By 1993, Inside Edition had become the most watched infotainment program in America, averaging more than 8 million viewers daily and outperforming rivals like A Current Affair and Hard Copy. Younger audiences especially were drawn to his no-nonsense approach. To them, O'Reilly wasn't just a journalist. He was a voice willing to challenge the powerful, the polished, and the protected. These early years defined his persona. His coverage included headline-making exclusives, such as his 1994 interview with convicted murderer Joel Steinberg, which drew more than 12 million viewers and became one of the most watched news interviews of its time. But his style wasn't without controversy. In 1991, he confronted a judge accused of being too lenient on criminals, and the heated exchange became national news. Supporters praised his courage. Critics called him reckless. O'Reilly didn't care. He was forging a new template for television journalism, one where the anchor was not a detached observer, but an active challenger. It was during this period that he coined the phrase, the no-spin zone, signaling his mission to strip away political polish and media messaging. Then, in 1994, at the height of his success, he did something no one saw coming. He walked away from Inside Edition to study at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. To some, it seemed like career suicide, but O'Reilly understood exactly what he was preparing for. He was sharpening himself for a larger platform. 2 years later, that platform arrived. In 1996, he joined the newly launched Fox News Channel, a network with big ambitions and everything to prove. O'Reilly was given his own primetime show, The O'Reilly Factor. From the very first broadcast, it was clear this was something new. The tone was tougher, the discussions sharper, and the audience responded instantly. Within 3 years, The O'Reilly Factor surpassed Larry King Live in viewership. By 2003, it had become the #1 show in cable news, and it stayed at #1 for 16 straight years. At its peak, the program drew more than 3 million viewers nightly, and during major political moments, that audience surged past 5 million, numbers usually seen on major network television, not cable. During the 2012 election, O'Reilly averaged 4.1 million viewers per night, more than double his closest competitor. His influence didn't stop with ratings. He reshaped conservative media itself, creating a blueprint that others, most notably Sean Hannity, would follow. To millions, Bill O'Reilly wasn't just a commentator. He was the voice that defined an era. Bill O'Reilly's influence extended far beyond television. His signature blend of opinion, investigative confrontation, and direct storytelling became the blueprint for modern cable news commentary. At the same time, his work as an author reshaped his public identity. His Killing series, beginning with Killing Lincoln and followed by Killing Kennedy, Killing Jesus and others sold more than 17 million copies worldwide, making him one of the best-selling nonfiction authors of his era. By the mid-2000s, O'Reilly was no longer just a broadcaster. He was a media empire, a dominant force in conservative culture, and a household name. His power at Fox News was unmatched. Reports suggested he earned nearly $20 million per year, placing him among the highest-paid figures in American television. By 2015, Bill O'Reilly had become the very identity of Fox News itself. Presidents, presidential candidates, and world leaders appeared on The O'Reilly Factor not because they wanted to, but because they had to. His 2014 pre-Super Bowl interview with President Barack Obama drew more than 4 million viewers and demonstrated the weight of his platform. In the public eye, he was untouchable, an authority, a powerhouse, the man who shaped political conversation across the nation. But while his career soared, his personal life began to fracture. On November 2, 1996, O'Reilly married Maureen McPhilmy, a poised, sharp public relations executive. For a time, they looked like a stable, successful couple. But beneath the surface, tensions grew, and after 14 years of marriage, everything collapsed. Their separation in 2010 and divorce in 2011 marked the beginning of a bitter and deeply public legal battle. O'Reilly later accused Maureen of using her divorce settlement to support her relationship with a Nassau County police detective, Jeffrey Gross, whom she eventually married. He filed a $10 million lawsuit, claiming deception and betrayal. The conflict quickly spiraled into years of emotional and legal turmoil, with their 2 children caught directly in the middle. In 2012, Maureen sought full custody, alleging that O'Reilly rarely fulfilled his parental responsibilities and often delegated them to hired professionals. Court hearings stretched on for years. By 2015, she was granted full custody of both children. O'Reilly appealed the decision, unwilling to accept the outcome, but in 2016, the appellate court upheld the ruling. The judges stated that the children had clearly expressed a desire to remain with their mother, describing her home as stable and safe. Then came the most devastating part of the case. Court documents included testimony from O'Reilly's teenage daughter, who said she had once witnessed her father physically assault her mother during an argument, an allegation O'Reilly denied. But the testimony changed everything. It became the emotional and legal turning point that shaped the custody decision and cast a long shadow over the public image he had spent decades building. At just 9 years old, Bill O'Reilly's daughter described a moment that would define the rest of her life. She testified that she had seen her father grab her mother by the throat, drag her down a staircase, and maintain his grip as her mother struggled to breathe. The memory was not just an accusation, it was a wound that never healed. As she grew older, she spoke of how that moment shaped her, creating a distance between father and child that no apology could ever undo. To her, Bill O'Reilly was not the confident, controlled man seen on television. He was someone driven by anger, a man who could not soften even for the people he loved most. For a figure who built his public identity around strength, discipline, and moral conviction, the collapse of his family life was a devastating irony. The court's final decision in 2016 confirmed a painful reality. His teenage children chose to live with their mother, leaving O'Reilly with limited parental authority. For years, he had spoken on air about the importance of family values and criticized men who failed their families. Now the story he once condemned had become his own. The moral authority he projected on screen was at odds with the quiet tragedy unfolding behind closed doors, but his personal heartbreak was soon overshadowed by something even more damaging. Allegations of sexual harassment began to surface, first quietly, then louder, then unstoppable. One of the earliest public cases came from Andrea Macris, a producer on his own show, who claimed that O'Reilly made late-night calls filled with explicit and graphic sexual remarks. including a now infamous moment where he described a sexual fantasy involving her in the shower, confusing a falafel with a loofah. The details were so strange and shocking that they became national headlines, turning a private settlement into a cultural spectacle. Years later, in 2017, Wendy Walsh, a former Fox News contributor, alleged that O'Reilly had promised her a permanent job and promotional support, but withdrew those opportunities when she rejected his advances. Unlike others, she had signed no confidentiality agreement, which allowed her to tell her story openly. Soon after, a black Fox News employee came forward, claiming that O'Reilly referred to her as hot chocolate and made degrading and inappropriate comments in the newsroom. Then came the revelation that shattered everything. The New York Times uncovered that, over a span of 15 years, Bill O'Reilly and Fox News had quietly paid $13 million to settle claims from 5 different women. Not rumors, not speculation, settlements. And the public reaction was immediate. People were stunned, not only by the allegations themselves, but by how long the silence had been maintained, protected, and paid for. The man who once stood at the top of American media was suddenly a symbol of the very abuse of power he had spent decades criticizing. From the heights of influence to the depths of controversy, the fall was swift and irreversible. A haunting reminder that even the strongest fall, not because of enemies, but because of the truths they can no longer outrun. In January 2017, just weeks before Fox News renewed Bill O'Reilly's contract for an astonishing $25 million per year, he paid a secret $32 million settlement to former network analyst Lis Veal. The allegations were no longer whispers or rumors. They spoke of psychological manipulation, coercion, and deeply disturbing behavior behind closed doors. When the New York Times exposed the settlement, the silent shield protecting O'Reilly's reputation collapsed almost instantly. More women stepped forward. Attorney Lisa Bloom, representing several accusers, called the moment historic, saying, "This is what happens when women finally speak." Her words sparked a broader reckoning, not only at Fox News, but across the media landscape. Advertisers fled faster than the network had ever seen. More than 50 major sponsors, including BMW and Mercedes-Benz, pulled out within days. The empire O'Reilly had built over 2 decades was not eroded slowly. It crumbled like glass in a single moment of daylight. On April 19, 2017, Fox News announced his departure in a short, emotionless statement. No tribute video, no farewell show, no final word. The man who once was Fox News was gone, removed not because he lost relevance, but because of what could no longer be denied. Yet Bill O'Reilly did not vanish. Instead, he reemerged on his own terms, first through a subscription-based podcast, then through video broadcasts, radio syndication, and stage tours. His audience, though smaller, remained fiercely loyal. Some saw him as a casualty of changing times. Others saw him as a man unwilling to accept responsibility. His allegiance with Donald Trump only deepened his place within the cultural divide. They toured together, defended one another publicly, and remained united through controversy. Whether praised or condemned, O'Reilly stayed visible, determined to prove that his voice still mattered, even if the world around him had changed. Today, at 76, Bill O'Reilly lives in quiet luxury at his waterfront estate in Manhasset, Long Island, a mansion of glass windows and silent halls. 10 bedrooms, a private dock, a life built from decades of relentless ambition. Yet inside those walls there are no cheering audiences, no studio lights, no live debates, only reflection. He was once a symbol of confidence, power, and command. Now he stands as a reminder of how quickly everything can shift, how a legacy can be rewritten not by fame, but by the shadows that fame tried to hide. Because in the end, Bill O'Reilly's story is not just about the rise, it's about the cost of power, the cost of pride, the cost of being a man the world watched, but few ever truly knew.